So for this episode, I'd like to skip all the way to chapter 17. But the reason is because I think we need to talk about religion. But people wonder, are we allowed to talk about religion in public schools? And the answer is we have to. It's literature. I mean, literature is full of religious references everywhere. And if we don't talk about it, then we risk misunderstanding the meaning. It's part of being a member of Western civilization that the three primary monotheistic religions have touched upon almost every element of our art and philosophy. And so understanding that, no matter what your personal beliefs are, is absolutely essential to understanding, the nature of the themes that we're going to be exploring. Abbott absolutely does. One, he's a theologian, so he studies religion, he studies God, and taught it. And so that's a big issue right on its own. And of course, it's obvious as we're reading a book about circle priests and theocracy and all those sorts of things, that this is at some level referencing religious ideas. We need to figure out how. Even the Sphere in chapter 17 calls this message the gospel of three dimensions. Abbott clearly does have a religious message in mind, and we need to figure out what that is. I want to look at one part of it. At the end of chapter 17, Sphere is upset. He's upset because he can't convince Square of his message. He mutters to himself. He says, quote, "No stranger must witness what you have witnessed. The gospel of three dimensions must not be thus frustrated. Not thus must the fruits of 1,000 years of waiting be thrown away." Clearly, this moment of his visitation is a cosmic moment, even a spiritual moment. Now let's look at the word gospel, the gospel of three dimensions. It comes from the word or the phrase Godspell, meaning basically a good story in the Latin and the Greek. The good news, for instance, is the story of Christ, the good story. So the gospel of Christ is the good news, and that's where that probably comes from. It's not an accident then that Sphere imagines his story to be a Messiah-like experience. Certainly, Square stops calling him a conjurer and a magician and starts thinking of him as the teacher with a capital T. And this 1,000 years business, another holy idea of Christ returning maybe in 1,000 years, or alternatively the 1,000-year reign of Christ when another order will be upon us. All that rings as a Christian concept throughout this passage. Therefore, this coming is a time for a new order, a new messenger, a new Messiah to arrive and carry the gospel of three dimensions. The Sphere, visiting from another world, has chosen Square as the carrier of that message. Well, maybe not the best messenger after all, since Square does not believe in him, and so Sphere must offer a miracle, a visit to Spaceland, to prove it to him. Reason is not enough to convince Square, or the King of Lineland, or Point, and so raw experience, the miracle, has to do it. A couple of thoughts about all of this. First, why is this gospel not given to the circle priests? As it becomes clear later, they already know about it, and they call it heresy. They will lock away or kill whoever speaks of it. So, the circle priests are against this gospel of reason and truth, in case we needed more reasons to dislike them. The messenger of truth, Square, is pretty incapable of spreading this message. This can only be blamed on him. How do you explain upward, not northward, to creatures of two dimensions? Language fails him. But how is a message of math or physics religious? Why does Abbott add the religious component at all? I have two thoughts here for us. The first is a literary one. Once we start to get into interpreting literature, allusions, references to other cultural ideas, are not hard to find. And of course, one of the most common references in Western literature is a Christ metaphor. But just pointing out the allusions, look, he's talking about Jesus, is not enough for us. It's not that Christ is referenced. We have to ask what he wants us to think about his topic through understanding the Christ metaphor. If you're not sure what I mean by this, give a quick listen to the Flatland podcast on Shakespeare illusions for some more backup. If sphere is the Jesus figure, even the God figure here, and we will have a misunderstood and persecuted prophet, is Abbott saying that the actual Bible story is similar to Flatland? Or is he creating a difference between the two and making a comment on his own Victorian culture again? Let's try out the former. If a holy or divine supernatural figure were to appear in the natural world, what would it look like? Note the definition of supernatural here, above the natural. So anything that is not of the natural world is here supernatural. As we see, sphere can only look like a circle that changes size because that's all that the physics of Flatland allows as he passes through. It's not that sphere is only a circle. He's quite a bit more, but we can only see him as a circle. Now, if a supernatural spirit or God were to appear to us, what would it appear like? It would also have to accept the physical laws of 3 dimensions. Well, at least to us. So, if this is true, perhaps Abbott is using math and physics and reason to make a religious argument. Faith works, but the spiritual must manifest itself according to the natural laws and mathematics. Since Abbott wrote several books on religion, it makes sense that he would do this. But on the other hand, sphere is no god. I mean, he's a guy, apparently one of many in Spaceland, who himself cannot reason very well. He refuses, for instance, to believe in a 4th or 5th dimension and gets emotional when pushed. He talks about talking to others in order to set himself straight, so he's not unique in Spaceland. Well then, what is all this talk about gospels then, if sphere is an ordinary guy? It looks like Abbott's theme or meaning with the religious illusion is more complicated still. And I leave that complication for you to speculate on.